Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I'm going to be covering the weather for May 10th of 2023, and what we're currently looking at for today is a small enhanced risk for northeastern Colorado, as well as parts of southwestern Nebraska, as well as northwestern Kansas, but mainly in northeastern Colorado, with a pretty large slight risk going down throughout pretty much a lot of the western central United States, through eastern Colorado, through parts of eastern New Mexico, as well as the western part of the Texas Panhandle, as well as the western part of the Oklahoma Panhandle, down through western Kansas and western Nebraska, as far north as eastern Wyoming, and a little bit into southwestern South Dakota, and we're gonna have a very small tornado threat for pretty much the entire area, as well as the small tornado threat for the small marginal threat that was down there. And I probably won't cover that too much, but I will definitely make sure to touch on it a little bit. But then we also have a pretty decent 15% risk for much of that slight risk area, as well as the marginal risk around it, with a small significant hatch threat through southern Colorado there, as well as for the hail threat. We do have a 30% with a hatch significant threat for pretty much just the enhanced risk, with a 15% around that throughout much of the slight risk, and a 5% through much of the marginal risk, which is expected. Moving to our pivotal weather models, you can see here on the 50 millibars, which I'll try to start off with more. You can see that this low pressure system situated over the western United States that I covered on the weekly overlook, expected to bring severe weather for today and tomorrow to much of the Midwest. Take a look at the weekly overlook for more information on that. But this long wave trough is expected to continue westward, and really impact a lot of the Midwestern United States, and really get a lot of the severe weather going throughout much of the slight risk area, especially the area where we had the enhanced risk all the way down south to where we had the marginal risk end. So severe weather is expected to be triggered by this long wave trough, as well as there is an embedded short wave trough associated with this. Moving on to our 500 millibars map, we can see the short wave trough that is moving alongside inside of the strong lower level long wave trough. You can see that it is really strong throughout much of the affected area, down throughout much of that slight risk area, especially strong in the lower levels where we had that hatched significant threat for damaging winds over on the SPC outlook. This long wave trough is expected to be the main trigger for severe weather development throughout much of the Midwestern United States, and expected to continue to trigger severe weather into tomorrow as well. Taking a look at our humidity plume here, the low pressure system being situated somewhere in this area, it is negatively tilted, so it is expected to draw a lot of moisture out of the southern reaches of the United States, and allow for intense amount of instability, and allow for the fuel for these severe weather developments to get so far up north. They're in the specific area that's being affected by the enhanced risk. There's not really too much, but it is definitely sufficient enough to trigger severe weather development. But again, it's not crazy like in the 70 dew points or in the 60s, but there is 60s not too far behind it. Even if it is in the upper 50s, it is still sufficient enough to fuel and trigger severe weather development in the enhanced risk area. Then taking a look at our instability, there isn't crazy amounts of instability as we were seeing yesterday, but there is still moderate to possibly severe amounts of instability, mainly situated over the Kansas area. But the main area that's being affected and going to be triggered for the severe weather development is over towards the west, and mostly in the moderate Cape levels, but it is definitely still sufficient for strong severe weather development, as well as the potential for large hail, especially in that area. even if most of the severe cape is situated over to the east, it is still significant enough to trigger severe weather development and fuel severe explosive systems, as well as the potential for large hail. Looking at the lapse rates here, we can see that there are very strong lapse rates, very significant lapse rates, very sufficient lapse rates throughout much of the slight risk area that is going to mix up those ingredients that we looked at earlier, the dew points and the instability, and allow for a very well mixed layer. And because of this layer being so well mixed, it's definitely going to allow for the potential of explosive storms throughout much of this area if the lapse rates are mixing up that all the ingredients really well, and everything is going to be really well mixed up again and allow for very explosive storms throughout much of the slight risk area, especially in this area where it's being forecasted, but again, everywhere down throughout the slight risk area where there's strong lapse rates allowing for very explosive storm development. Now let's take a look at our surface instability, and I've moved into a really zoomed in view here, so we can take a look at the stronger tornado potential in more closer view, because the surface instability is what's really going to allow for the tornado potential alongside the wind shear. But you need surface instability for a strong updraft to cause rotating supercells. So I've moved into a more zoomed in view here to take a closer look at the surface instability in where we're going to see the more intense potential for tornadoes. Continuing later into the evening, you can see going into much of that area, you can see very strong and very sufficient surface instability with simulated values in the 200s, the very low 200s. Do I think that we're going to get surface instability in the low 200s? Realistically, probably not, but it could be possible. But then as it continues northward, you can see it just absolutely explodes. You can see very strong surface instability, very, very strong, very, very sufficient to allow for strong updrafts and allow for a very strong tornado potential going into Nebraska. And you can see it just gets bigger, bigger and bigger. So it is very, very sufficient and very possible that we could see tornadoes because of the very strong surface instability. But we still need wind shear. So let's take a look at wind shear. So now that we're on wind shear, before I go forward in looking at wind shear, I do want to mention that the very strong, it looks like very strong low-level trough moving through the area, as well as the upper-level trough, or not upper level, but mid-level winds, is definitely going to allow for the potential for strong surface instability. So let's see if that still stands true going forward. And you can see it does. You can see very strong surface instability to allow for rotating supercells, very strong rotating supercells as well throughout much of that area that is being affected by the enhanced risk, and that is expected to just continue as the storms move eastward, and very much allow for the potential for tornadic development throughout much of that enhanced area. If we look at the values here, the simulated values, you can see it looks like to be in the 30s and 50s and possibly or 40s, but also possibly even the 50s here in some very small areas. But it is definitely very strong and definitely sufficient enough for tornadic development throughout much of the area. And you can see the wind shear does continue all the way southward across much of that slight risk area where we had that 2% chance throughout much of the slight risk area again. So with that in mind, the very moderate instability and low-level winds, as well as the strong wind shear and surface wind shear, and everything that we've looked at so far, is definitely going to allow for the potential of large hail, the potential for tornadoes, as well as the potential for very damaging winds, especially in the areas where we saw the more intense low-level jet in mainly that area, where there was also the hatch significant threat. So, if you live in these areas, I would definitely keep that in mind. But I do have one more thing to look at before I continue. Let's then take a look at our composite reflectivity here. You can see all these systems here that are in the slight risk area, not so much in the enhanced risk area. Starting off throughout the western part of the slight risk area through central Colorado, southern Wyoming, and parts of New Mexico. And it does look like those do start off as isolated systems and then rapidly, as more storms are developed, rapidly intensify and organize into a very long line of severe weather. But it looks like it's very broken and very scattered. But it does quickly organize into big groups here. Especially in this area where we can see where it looks like where the increased reflectivity is definitely has the possibility for some large hail with it throughout those storms, as well as the possibility of some very damaging winds. But then all throughout this area and this area, it does look like it does organize into lines and groups after it starts off as isolated systems. So it's still, even though it is organized into big groups and big lines, that does not take away the tornado potential at all, and it is still possible for tornadoes to develop in these conditions. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator. I want to thank anyone that has watched my most recent forecast from yesterday, not yesterday, May 8th. It's done absolutely outstanding. I think it's somewhere in the 130, 140 views right now, which is a new milestone for me. And I just want to say thank you to anyone that has supported me so far, anyone that has helped contribute. Just by watching my forecast and giving support to them and helping really push me forward to actually do this. Um, I just want to thank you guys because that forecast has really given me a new boost in energy to help improve with my forecast. And I again just want to say thank you. And hopefully, I will see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.